Hey friends, this week I'm going to break down how to play tremolo on ukulele. Now it's a fairly simple concept. We're going to play a string of repeated notes on our upper string while having a moving melodic line played with our thumb. What we need to focus on with this is truly the right hand pattern. Now we've adapted this from the classical guitar world, and if you're familiar with this technique, you know that there's really two different versions of this. There's the classical tremolo, which is 4 notes, and then there is the flamenco tremolo, which is a 5-note grouping. So in this video, we're discussing the classical iteration of this, and eventually in time, once we're more comfortable with the basic technique, we can start to talk about the flamenco version. Now I've arranged all these exercises so that they only really use a C major chord. We don't want to worry about left hand movement while we're trying to break down a right hand technique. We're really focused on what the right hand is doing here. So first little exercise, we're just going to play quarter notes to familiarize ourselves with which fingers are playing when. And the order of this is going to be the same throughout. We're going to play just on the A string, we'll voice a C major chord, so we're just going to play the 3rd fret of our A string. And we're going to strike first with our thumb, and then our ring finger, and then our middle finger, and then our first finger, and just loop this. Thumb, ring, middle, first. Let's try just the basics together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I know that this might seem very basic to you, but when we're putting in these new right hand techniques, we want to focus on just that, the right hand itself. Remember that the speed always comes later. What we're really worried about is the evenness of the notes. Each of these notes should be the same exact length. And if we don't have that evenness of subdivision when we're doing it slowly, it's going to just become a train wreck when we try to build up the speed. The speed will come later, but it's much easier to add in once we're very comfortable with the right hand technique. So in the next exercise, we're going to go back and forth now with the same right hand pattern on the same exact note, but we're going to build up the speed here. We're going to start out on 8th notes, or a half subdivision of the beat, and then go down to 16th notes, or 1/4 of a subdivision of the beat, which is ultimately what the tremolo pattern is 16th notes. And this forces us to get our right hand moving, but not to just fall into the trap of going on autopilot while we play. So this next exercise will sound a little bit something like this. It'll be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and Good, now let's try that little exercise together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I want you to stop here and get very comfortable with these first 2 exercises, as simplistic as they feel, before you move on to the other ones. Because once we start putting the moving thumb line into the equation, you'll find that things get a lot harder. So if we look at the next little section, we'll see that this is now all 16th notes, which, as I said, is ultimately what we'll be playing in a tremolo pattern. We're going to have a moving bass now. We'll voice our C major chord just as before. For the first measure, we're going to play 4 open Cs. Second measure, we'll play 4 E's. Next measure, we'll play G's on your high G string. And back to the E. So that's our melody. That's all we're playing, just a very simple quarter note melody. And what we're throwing over top is the repeated A string. So the C on the 3rd fret of our A string is what we'll be playing. And the whole exercise, when we put it together, will sound like this. So if you want to get really comfortable with this, start out by just addressing the thumb pattern itself before adding in the rest of the right hand over top. Let's give this all a shot together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now what you want to keep in mind as you get more comfortable with this pattern is that the thumb is playing our melody. We're generally used to having it on the upper strings, but now that the thumb is playing the melody on the lower strings, we want to be wary of accenting that note, as the upper strings are now just carrying really a drone. That is our backing pattern, while the thumb should be more prominent. So practice just accenting these thumb strokes. In the next exercise, we're going to take exactly what we just did, a C major arpeggio, but we're now going to condense it to one measure. So we'll play one thumb stroke on C, one on E, one on G, and right back to E, all with the repeating A string over top. So it'll sound a little bit something like this when we condense it to one measure. Let's try that much together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for the final exercise, it's time to add in some movement in the left hand. While we could just play open strings the whole time, it's certainly going to be a lot more interesting if we actually voice other notes underneath. So throughout this entire pattern, we're going to keep that C on the 3rd fret of our A string over top. That will never move, but we're going to have some movement on the lower voices. So let's look at what the thumb is doing and take the repeated note out of the equation. We're starting out the same exact way, C, E, and then we're going to voice a G7 chord, but leave the 3rd fret down, so it should be a G sus4 chord. So we have open 2, 1, 3, and then we'll go 2, 1, and then open E, open G, 1st fret, the F on your E string, and then the A we're now going to play on the 2nd fret of our G string, because remember that the C is repeated over top. So I play the first 2 bars of this, just the thumb, so you can hear the melody. It's going to sound like this. And then we're going to just walk down our C major scale. G on our open G string, F on the 1st fret of our E, open E, D on the 2nd fret of our C, and then open, and then we'll finish this out with a little arpeggio line. So we land on the C, and then the open E, and then open G, and then back down to the 2nd fret of our C string for a D. So here's the entire thumb pattern, because I want you to have the melody in your ear before you try to throw the repeated notes over top. It'll sound something like this. Resolve to a C major chord right at the end. And now this is what it's going to sound like with the repeated note over top. Let's try that much together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now with any new technique, this is going to take quite a while to build up. As I mentioned earlier in the video, we need to focus slowly on the right hand technique so that we're not thinking about that while we are playing. We want that to be like riding a bicycle. So take your time and just take a few minutes each day to practice this right hand pattern until it becomes very comfortable to you. And then you'll be able to start throwing this in with a moving melodic line underneath. I'll see you all next week.